All, thanks for joining us today. Really do appreciate you taking the time. My name is Paul Padaruth and I'm Head of Commercial at the Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund, or SIF, here at Innovate UK. Together with my colleagues, we're going to talk you through the newly launched Round 4 of the Strategic Innovation Fund. So firstly, let's start with a very high-level recap. Next slide, please, Manu, of the Strategic Innovation Fund, what it is, what it's for, how it works, for those of you on the call who may not have come across it before. The Strategic Innovation Fund is a partnership between Ofgem and Innovate UK to deliver the competition element of the innovation incentives that form part of the current RIIO-2 regulatory price control. So this is a commitment by Ofgem to make £450 million available to fund innovation activity led by the gas and electricity licensees across Great Britain that have the potential to deliver real impact for people, planet and business. The vision here reflects the dual ambitions of both organisations. We want to accelerate the UK's transition to net zero while recognising the cost to the consumer. And we also want to make the UK the best place for energy businesses to grow and scale. And joining these visions together, we want to make the UK the best place to be an energy consumer, an energy operator and an energy entrepreneur. I've already touched briefly on our purpose. So we want to reduce the cost or increase the value of products and services that affect the consumer and make sure they've got input to what we're trying to do. We fundamentally want to incentivise net zero, tackling one of the major planetary challenges of our generation. And we want to do it in a way that builds resilience and security into our energy system. And finally, we can't achieve any of this without the collective power of our innovator and business community and our energy network licensees. We want the Strategic Innovation Fund to achieve its vision by fulfilling its purpose. Next slide, please, Manu. So our mission is what we're going to focus on to do that. Now, we'll always be interested in the commercialisation of innovation within our energy system. So from looking at culture at a network level to the innovation basics for an innovator, we have and continue to develop tools and support to help you think now about what commercialisation might look like for you in the future. Alignment, now that may be between other funders, other sectors, or even regulation itself, and it's something that we're always keen to try and drive. And responsiveness, this is how we deliver our funding. So as you can see here, we set 4 innovation challenge areas annually, and that's where we're at right now. What follows that is a phased funding approach that can help fund projects with progressively more funding while de-risking at each stage. And the Discovery Alpha Beta model is there to support this. Now these 3 boxes at the bottom remain core to us, but more of our focus this year is going to be on these top 3 boxes. So diversifying our pipeline. My colleagues will take you through the ideation runway we have. This is the approach we want to see develop your ideas into something that's high value to the energy networks. We want more of the creative thinking that exists to broaden our pipeline, and the ideation process is the mechanism that will reduce the asymmetry of need between innovators and the networks. This is our 4th round of SIF now, so we really want to be looking at generating evidence and insights from what we're delivering that not only support the programme, but can also help to shape our future direction of travel. And ultimately, we're here to fund transformational projects. We want to see, encourage and support more larger projects that can deliver meaningful change across the energy system. Next slide, please, Manu. Thank you. So what you can see here is a timeline of the SIF and where we currently are. So to date, across Discovery Alpha Beta, we've funded 157 projects, allocating £130 million and securing over 35 million of contributions towards these projects. We've more than 70 SMEs who have engaged with our wider support through Innovate UK Business Growth and Business Connect, and our funding has gone out to 215 different organisations. Now, across all of these projects funded to date, we have some early projected benefits, so cost savings and emissions reductions. And while much of this will not succeed That's the nature of innovation. It's a really good marker of the vision that we're seeing from the projects being funded. And with that overview, I'll just hand you over to my colleague, David.
Thanks, Paul. Morning, everybody. My name is David Richardson. I'm Head of Innovation for the Strategic Innovation Fund at Innovate UK. If we could move on to the next slide, I'm just going to talk you through a bit of an overview of this year's challenge setting process before we dive into the content of what the actual challenges are. Next slide, please, Manu. So the challenge setting process for round 4 has run over the last couple of months. It really starts with a review of the energy sector over the last year since we set the round 3 challenges. This includes looking at changes in government policy, but also strategic reports coming out of businesses and an evaluation of the new innovations that have appeared through the SIF, but also through the wider market. From this, we then start engaging in targeted one-to-one interviews with areas of leadership across the sector and specific innovators that might be able to offer additional insight into some of these areas that have developed over the last year, and run a few engagement sessions to try and refine the challenges down to more specific areas that we can work on. We then take a short list of challenge areas through to stakeholder-specific workshops with critical partners such as the energy networks, policymakers and industry, before moving on to a shortened list of round 4 challenges, which were then iterated with discussion from Ofgem. And this year there has been a particular emphasis on Ofgem setting the direction to really focus on the strategic challenges that they see being required ahead of the next energy network price control period. We could skip on to the next slide, please, Manu. And before I jump into what the round 4 challenges are, I just want to set the context of how we look at the energy system and the areas that we're focusing on within the Strategic Innovation Fund. So right in the middle of everything we do is our consumers and customers. Really, what we're working towards is trying to provide better products and services which deliver on the needs of energy consumers across the UK. And we want to do that at significant scale and pace to ensure that we meet those needs in a timely manner whilst fulfilling our net zero targets as well. Around this, there's the other parts of the sector which are really critical to how this whole system operates. There's the assets and infrastructure that consumers directly interact with, including electric vehicle charge points, heat pumps, electrolyzers for industrial customers, and a whole range of other things. And the challenges that we're setting are really in the frame of the scale of the challenge that we have to face. We've got to connect 2 times offshore wind over the next 5-10 years. We're likely to see a 4 times increase in the deployment of offshore wind and a 5 times increase in solar PV by 2035. That's going to raise significant challenges for the energy sector. Essentially, we'll have far more intermittent renewables on the system, which need to be predicted better, managed, coordinated, whilst operating the system in a low inertia environment. It's not just about power as well. We also need to scale up and integrate 10 gigawatts of green hydrogen production and really think about how we most optimally integrate that within our energy system. So around all these targets, and there has been a real emphasis on the deployment of generation and demand assets over the last 15 years or so. But really this year and the past couple of years, we've seen an increased emphasis on the infrastructure, which is going to link all this together and enable us to maximize the use of all these intermittent renewables, ensure that people are able to get their charge point connection as quickly as possible, or a supercharging hub is able to get the grid connection that it needs. So our particular focus within the Strategic Innovation Fund is this segment. It's building sufficient sustainable energy infrastructure and capability to enable the system to operate as a whole. We know that we're likely to see a rapid increase in the pace and scale of network build out, particularly over the next decades, and this could include a doubling in the size of parts of the power network. We're aware of the constraints, and we've already seen supply chain constraints over some key areas, and we really need to think about how we develop our energy system pathways and that. Connection times, although there have been some initiatives to improve them over the last year or so, we still know that there's a lot of projects stuck in that connections queue, which could otherwise be getting rolled out much more quickly. And then finally, we look at the markets, regulation, codes and practices which sit around all of this. These are critical in being able to roll out the infrastructure that's required. And we can't just look at physical infrastructure in isolation. It also has to be developed in a way which supports new markets and regulations. But ultimately, where all the innovations that we're looking for against these challenges, they sit within that infrastructure bracket. But we do want you to consider the whole system as you develop your proposals. So with no further ado, if we could click onto the next slide, please, Manu. The 4 challenges for round 4 of the Strategic Innovation Fund is challenge 1, faster network development, which is really around accelerating the pace of energy network development to meet our net zero goals, with a particular focus on the target of having a net zero power system by 2035. Challenge 2 builds upon one of our round 3 challenges, and is really looking at deploying greater heat flexibility. And that's how we can best use heat flexibility for network and system benefit, whilst accelerating the deployment of low carbon heating assets. Challenge 3 is embedding resilience. Again, this builds on some of our previous challenges, focusing on resilience and robustness, and is really looking to accelerate the preparation of energy networks for a truly resilient net zero transition. And finally, challenge 4 is about accelerating towards net zero energy networks. This is distinct from challenge 1 in that it's really focusing on how do we deliver efficiency in the energy networks themselves. So challenge 1 focuses on how we can accelerate the build out of the system, whereas challenge 4 is really looking at how do we optimize the efficiency of the system. We'll have a little bit more details on that in a moment. Next slide, please, Manu. Before we go into the details of the round 4 challenges, I just wanted to articulate to you how the challenges have developed over time. In round 1, we really started with the high-level strategic areas of interest for the energy sector over the RIIO-2 price control period, which were whole systems integration, how do we decarbonize transport, how do we decarbonize heat, and then the data and digitalization of the energy system as well. Over the course of those challenges, we've increasingly refined our focus areas through round 2 and 3, but they remain the high-level areas of interest. We're just starting to identify innovation gaps that still exist, having looked at the past portfolio, and where we can continue to see improvements as we move through the programme. The principles we use for developing SIF challenges is really we've been looking to make them more specific and mission orientated, and particularly this round aligned with Ofgem's strategic priorities. We're trying to be agile and respond to system needs, whilst also being able to assess these gaps in the portfolio as we move through the programme. Something that we will be highlighting several times through this presentation is that we really want an increased focus on some of the cross-cutting topics within your project proposals. And in particular, we're looking at vulnerability and consumer-centric design should be embedded in all projects. digitalization, and how do we champion the principles of the energy data best practice guidance, and how do we develop the skills and supply chains to be able to deliver against the innovations that we're developing. If we could move on to the next slide, Manu. So challenge one is around faster network development. And the context for this is that the sixth carbon budget and the UK's energy security strategy really recognises that the capacities of low carbon generation, such as offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar, need to increase significantly to achieve a net zero energy system by 2035. The increase in intermittent generation is going to require gigawatts of flexibility assets, such as storage, electrolyzers, and gas carbon capture and storage, to be running by 2035 and to be able to support the system in the way that we foresee it transforming. As mentioned, we do foresee other bottlenecks in acting as barriers towards this, which include supply chain congestion, the evolution of regulation and markets, as well as planning processes which aren't only under the energy network's control, such as local authorities or national planning. And we really recognise that there's likely to be an average doubling of network boundaries between now and 2035 to facilitate decarbonisation. Some specific targets, like 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035, might require transmission network operators to deliver up to 5 times the amount of transmission network capacity in England and Wales by 2030. And that's comparable to the amount of build-outs that has happened over the last 30 years. So really honing in on the scale of the challenge here. Within each challenge, we've got a number of themes that you have to apply against. The first one in challenge one is developing novel methods to increase electrical capacity from existing assets or support faster and more efficient connection methods, including using digital innovations. The second one is regional balancing approaches to accelerate low carbon technology deployment. And these could be on the very local level, at the level of neighbourhoods or small towns, or up to a regional level. And we also think it's quite important for people to consider the interactions between the local and the national when developing these. Each of our challenges have a set of outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Although you're not applying against these as scope, it is really pivotal that you keep these in mind and review them as you develop your ideas. And the outcomes we're trying to achieve through challenge one are to promote greater real-time awareness and operation of power networks. So moving from a more planned basis to a more dynamic one. How do we align supply and demand assets to host the capacity of energy networks in the best way we can? Building upon some of the recommendations of the Nick Windsor report, the Energy Networks Chair report, which made a lot of recommendations that these challenges are built on. We really see the need to digitalise our energy system at a faster rate. So we'd like to see demonstrated greater use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and where suitable, quantum computing. We want to deliver replicable energy system models, and this is really important. We're not just looking for niche solutions which can solve a problem for a very localized area. We want something that will be able to be replicable and scalable across a large proportion of the UK energy system. And finally, we're trying to increase confidence of energy networks, regulator, and other actors in the energy sector on the effective of regional energy models. So how do we build consensus and evidence to be able to support these rollouts at scale? We do have a little figure at the bottom of each challenge, which shows you which type of networks are most suitable for these challenge areas. And you will need an energy network to lead each of your applications, but we'll have more on the process for doing that later. Next challenge, Manu. So challenge 2. Challenge 2 is around greater heat flexibility. And this is really looking to build on our round 3 challenge, which was looking at leveraging flexibility to aid the deployment of low carbon heating solutions. We still see this as a relatively under represented area of the portfolio, and heat is becoming an increasing demand on the network. We now have targets such as 600,000 heat pumps to be rolled out annually per year by 2030. And the heat loads could, alongside electric vehicle demand, could end up doubling the peak demand on the electricity system unless we leverage flexibility in the way that's required. So we've only got one theme under this challenge, and that's to develop flexibility solutions to reduce peak electricity demand from heat decarbonisation. The outcomes we're really looking to achieve are to increase participation in thermal flexibility in both DSO and ESO markets. We want to see an increased reduction in the time to integrate heat decarbonisation into network planning. We're looking to reduce heat peak-led demand through flexibility, and this can look at a whole range of flexible resources, ranging from thermal energy storage to integration of heat networks to distributed storage, electrolyzers, a whole range of them. And then finally, to increase the use of renewable power for electrified heat through flexibility. Next slide, and I'll hand over to Manu.
Thank you, David. So just conscious of time, so I'm just kind of pick up pace on this a little bit. So the third challenge is embedding resilience, and I'll kind of do a similar format. So I'll just give a little bit of context to it, and then we'll run through the primary focus area when you're developing a project and some of the outcomes that we're looking for. So the embedding resilience challenge is really focused on 2 key aspects. The first one is, how do we best help rural communities transition to net zero? The second one is, how do we kind of transition plan to an energy network and an energy system with reducing natural gas demand as we move towards net zero? So picking up on the first point first, in terms of the rural communities, 1 in 5 customers are in rural locations, and rural locations have, I guess, their own characteristics, which kind of warrants looking at them as a specific segment when we're planning the energy transition. So there are aspects such as 50% of these areas are located off the gas grid, and I think 6 out of 10 consumers within that segment have EPC energy performance certificate ratings of D or low, which means the fabric is generally inefficient compared to the rest of the UK. The per capita income also tends to be lower, which kind of raises poverty and affordability issues. And additionally, these communities tend to rely more so on cars and kind of have longer journeys, etc., given the access to kind of public transport services is lower because of the location. And from an energy network perspective, they also tend to be marked by kind of aging grids and also electricity networks, particularly in terms of not having particular headroom or capacity, which means that extrapolating some of the kind of mainstream ways of decarbonizing the economy, for example, through heat electrification or transport electrification, or indeed integrating large-scale generation, makes it quite hard to do in rural communities. And therefore, it raises a lot of equity, affordability, and timeliness challenges that are very important to develop bespoke solutions. And that's really the focus, the first part of the focus, I guess, of this challenge. And therefore, the scope of that really is what we're looking for is cross-vectoral approaches to decarbonize rural communities in a resilient manner. And I guess by cross-vectoral, what we mean is really taking into account heat, transport, power together to see if we can develop better and more integrated approaches rather than kind of siloed and then figuring out later when another part of the energy use has to decarbonize that actually it is not effective and we could have done it slightly differently. So that's really the first part of it. And the second is the kind of transitional aspect for a system with kind of falling gas demand. And And I guess it's already happening in 2022. I think the natural gas demand fell by about 8% compared to 2021. And then I think estimates show that as we kind of move towards net zero, by 2035, we could be reducing natural gas use by up to 60%. And of course, natural gas is used across the system. It is used in home heating. It's used across industrial uses. It is a key part of our energy mix, not only for providing kind of power, but also flexibility and other system services. And therefore, natural gas is quite embedded across the system. And of course, most importantly, our gas networks, transmission and distribution networks, play that critical role in taking gas from the different injection points and keeping them at the right pressures and moving them across the country to where they're needed in the time that they're needed, and doing it all safely and effectively and so on. And therefore, this raises quite a big question in terms of, as the natural gas demand falls, what does that system security, adequacy, and kind of safety look like? And then, of course, it opens up the question in terms of what is the most sustainable and cost-effective use of the gas networks with this kind of falling gas demand. And therefore, I think there's been research that people have started to look at this, that, for example, decommissioning or finding alternate uses for the network could be up to 70 billion pounds by 2050. And this could be 4 to 5% of the total net zero capital outlay for the UK economy overall. So it's actually quite a significant part of the net zero challenge, and it's an important one for us to focus on. And that's why we kind of decided to kind of look at this. And I think we're mainly going to be focusing on 4 areas. The first one is better understanding areas of the GB network where the gas demand is falling in such a rate that the infrastructure, we can make clear that perhaps might not be needed in the future as we move towards net zero. Then the question is, how do we best maintain security of supply and resilience? Because the gas networks have played a critical role in being able to meet some of the peaks, being able to meet some of the cold weather events, etc. And therefore, it's not a straightforward and easy task to think about how does the system meet all of those requirements or surpass those requirements that the customers have been used to with an alternate set of infrastructure whilst maintaining security of supply, etc. The third one is, where we can prove that the infrastructure is perhaps not needed. What are the alternate uses, within energy or outside energy, that we can put the infrastructure to kind of deliver the greater societal and consumer benefit? And finally, where there are no alternate uses, and we do recognize that, as we move towards net zero, that the use is not there, is what are the most environmentally sustainable and cost-effective ways to kind of decommission them? So that's really the background to this challenge, and the specific focus area then is transition planning for an energy system with reducing gas demand. And so very quickly, the outcomes that we're looking for here are, from a rural community challenge perspective, is really alleviating the energy network barriers that disproportionately rural consumers are not affected by energy network related barriers to kind of realize their decarbonization ambitions. The next one is, to David's point, creating novel but replicable approaches to support rural decarbonization in a timely and resilient and cost-effective manner, that actually we can apply this in multiple parts of the UK. And as we move towards the second part of the challenge, it's to develop critical evidence to clarify the role of GB gas networks in a net zero transition, because it's still, there's a lot of different views, and some backed by evidence and some not so much. And therefore, SIF wants to play a critical role in developing that evidence base to feed into that discussion and support decision making. And of course, deploy novel and cost-effective alternate uses of the gas infrastructure in the parts of the system where that's viable. And then finally, improving the gas network decommissioning cost estimates and developing novel solutions to reduce it. And here, I think there's a kind of broad applicability across all of the networks, given the 2 areas. Finally, in terms of challenge 4, this is accelerating energy networks towards net zero. And as David mentioned, the difference here is that this is ensuring that the scale and the pace of development is also done in a sustainable way. And for this round, we're particularly focusing on innovation to improve efficiency of network operations. So the quick background to this is that the current kind of losses from an efficiency perspective is between kind of 5 to 7%, and this could potentially increase to 20% based on some research, which is quite a lot of terawatt hours energy. If we assume that electricity demand by 2050 is somewhere between 550 to 650 terawatt hours, we're talking hundreds of terawatt hours potentially lost through kind of efficiency losses, which means that it's a significant wastage of energy, but it also means we need to overbuild generation infrastructure. We need to overbuild a lot of other bits of the system to kind of make up for the losses. And therefore, this really adds cost to the system. There's been some varying estimates about what this actually costs us, but one of the recent figures is that even at the current efficiency loss levels, this could be costing a typical GB household about £100 a year, which is already a lot. But then thinking of the significant increase that we could potentially have, and particularly in the context of greater network utilization, use of storage, flexibility, low carbon technology, I think research is showing that there could be quite a significant increase in the amount of kind of efficiency losses. And therefore, this challenge is really kind of, getting our heads around kind of what the complexities are and developing kind of cost-effective solutions to kind of addressing it. And some of the outcomes that we're looking for here is really developing solutions to reduce the efficiency loss across the transmission distribution system on the power side, and also achieving greater clarity and improved evidence on reducing efficiency losses in the context of greater network utilization and deployment of low carbon technologies. Because again, the kind of, I think there is an agreed view that it will increase, but no agreed view on is this something that we should live with as we move towards net zero and accept that there's going to be a significant cost to society, or actually is this actually a ripe area for innovation to help reduce, because the cost outlay to society and to networks could be quite high as we move towards net zero. And from a relevance perspective, this is primarily relevant to the TOs, DNOs, and the ESOs because it's primarily focused on electricity efficiency losses. So those are the 4 challenge areas, and we're very happy to pick up any kind of questions on it. And one other bit, I think David picked this at the kind of early part of the presentation, is there are also some cross-cutting considerations for SIF Round 4. And these are things that you need to think about as you develop your ideas and applications, because we're really keen to see these come out and being thought about in your application. And again, this is not just a tick box exercise to say it's nice to have, but we really believe that embedding these principles and considerations in your project actually gives it greater probability of success when it comes to rollout, commercialization, and scale up. So it is in everyone's interest to kind of do this beyond, Innovate UK and Ofgem kind of asking you to think about it. And so I think they genuinely are useful things to consider. The first one is inclusive development. This is primarily to ensure any product, services, changes that we make considers the diverse and sometimes different needs of customers across the system, and it doesn't kind of lock people out. And one of the examples is, some of the work that Citizens Advice have done recently have shown that the current flexibility markets really only work for a certain socio-demographic across the UK. As we increasingly use, for example, flexibility as a way to reduce energy bills, perhaps it can only be available to a certain part of the society, which is not a kind of future that we want to develop. So this really is thinking about how to make it more applicable. The next one is skills and capabilities is that issue that we're developing a lot of innovations and the system could look very different in 10, 15 years time, but we need the skill sets to be able to integrate it, to roll it out and sustain and maintain it, to ensure those new skill needs are signaled and those also develop at the pace needed to kind of sustain these innovations. Third one is data digitalization. I think David mentioned it. At a minimum, it's about implementing the energy data best practice. And then finally, it's about supply chains. It's really understanding, if we do make choices about hardware or software, that actually, given the supply chain constraints and the increasing kind of volatility of relying on international supply chains, that actually we're not making the problems worse, and there is a sustainable way to secure logistically these solutions and embed them and deploy them at the rate and pace that we need. As David mentioned, the kind of multiples amounts of networks that we need to build out in the next few years. So those are all the cross-cutting considerations for round 4. And now I'll hand over to Ellen.
Hi all. My name is Ellen Bedmore and I'm an innovation lead on the SIF. So this slide is related to those who want to participate in ideation and submit their proposal through our call for ideas, with the ultimate goal of potentially partnering with a network and potentially even submitting into the SIF for funding. So we've done ideation a few times now, and we've taken some learnings that we want to pass on to you. So some areas for improvement that we've seen from previous rounds are lack of clarity on energy network remit. So the ideas need to be network related, otherwise they won't be able to be taken forward by a network. Value proposition to the energy network and network customers. So if this isn't clear, it makes it very difficult to prioritise for submission. Weak or no representation of end user or the problem owner's values and or project plan. And finally, ideas leading with commercially available product or service. So ideas that already have a very high level, high TRL product that doesn't need further development. Next slide, please. So more widely, key aspects to consider for a generally strong SIF application. We're looking for projects that are problem-centric, so we need problems driving solution identification and or development. We need them to be user-oriented, so identifying the users who actually face the problem that's identified. Outcome-driven, so SIF projects are encouraged to develop a vision that ultimately will deliver, go beyond R&D and deliver a commercial product service that's relevant. Well-structured, so this is just a given really, but we need projects that have strong project management and solid identification of risks, and additional and complementary. So we're looking for projects that will build off previous network energy innovation and avoid duplication. So a way to look at other projects which have been done previously is to go on the Energy Networks Association Smart Networks portal, which is where all of the networks have to register their innovation projects. So you'll be able to see what other work has been done through that channel. Over to Beth, I believe.
Thanks, Ellen. Hi, everyone. My name's Beth Foster. I'm also an innovation lead here at the SIF. I work with Ellen. And I'm going to take you through the how part. We've talked a lot about what is being considered at the moment and what you need to do as an innovator, but how do you engage with us here at the SIF and how do you engage with the networks? So there are effectively 3 stages. There's the learn, engage, and then if successful, we help you partner with the networks. So in the learn stage, we encourage you to look at these 3 aspects. We have the round 4 challenge webinars. You've already ticked off one because you're here today, but there's going to be more webinars which will go into the details of each of the challenges and what needs to be considered in each of those this week, I believe, up to the 15th. We also encourage you to look at the Smarter Networks portal on the Energy Networks Association website, which Ellen mentioned. You can see a whole catalogue of all the projects which have gone before. You can see what their plans were, their applications, and the end result of the projects as well. We also recommend that you go onto YouTube and you look at our SIF project show and tell. So previous projects have had to do presentations online to describe what they did whilst being funded here at the SIF. Really, really informative, gives you a nice flavour of the kind of things that we look for. And also, whilst you're on YouTube, if you're new to the energy sector, then we recommend you look at our Introduction to the Energy Networks webinar series, which is free and available online. Once you've done that and you've figured out where you align within the 4 challenges and within the sector, then we encourage you to engage with us, and we offer many different mechanisms for you to get in touch. So first of all, we have the ideation workshops. These are workshops which are tailored around specific themes which are going to be considered in this year's challenges. It's a chance for you to discuss these ideas with other innovators, potentially networks, experts in the industry. We also have one-to-one innovation surgeries, and those are one-to-one sessions with the innovation lead. So someone like myself or Ellen will take some time with you to talk through your idea, where you are, what you've done before, how much evidence you've built up ready for your application, and we'll help steer you in the right direction. They're also a really good opportunity if maybe you're not sure if SIF is the right funding mechanism, and perhaps through these surgeries we can direct you to more suitable funding mechanisms too. And then through those 2 different mechanisms, we provide tailored idea support and development. Yes, I think someone, sorry, I've just seen a question pop up in the chat. Can they post the link to the ENA Smarter Networks portal in the chat, please? So once you've learned and engaged with us, we then ask you to submit your idea into our Call for Ideas competition. This is not a funding competition. This is a competition effectively to work towards a pitch slot to the energy networks. So once you submit your idea, it gets assessed, and then the very best of those ideas get pitched to the energy networks. If you go through this and you don't get an opportunity to pitch, it's also great because you get a lot of feedback about your idea, what works well, what doesn't work well. Is it something the energy networks are interested in at the moment, or maybe they're not, or maybe it might just be suited to a different funding mechanism. So after you've gone through the Call for Ideas and potentially the pitching, we then offer support for building, consortia building. So who are the people you need in order to carry out this project? And then we help you shape those proposals ready for discovery later on in the year. Next slide, please. So here are the dates. Feel free to take a screenshot of this. So expression of interest is open. I believe the mechanism for this is by emailing the SIF mailbox. If there's another mechanism, please could someone pop it in the chat. We also have the Round 4 Challenges launch webinars this week, and the innovation surgeries start from the 18th of March. So please do express your interest if you want to get involved in those. And then the ideation workshops will proceed afterwards, about April and May. And then the 1st of May is when the Call for Ideas competition opens. Really good way to get feedback on your ideas. And next slide, please. So again, this is just some of the ways we support innovators. We support you, especially if you're new to the energy sector. If you're an innovator who might have come from water or telecoms or something like that, we can help give you a flavour and understanding of how the energy network landscape really works. Again, you'll have a copy of these slides and you'll be able to access the links here. And I will be in the background answering your questions in the chat. Thanks very much. I'm going to hand back to Manu.
Thank you, Beth. So I think a lot of the questions on how to access these, we'll get to that in a second. We've got a slide that gives you access to the forms, etc. So I think Beth mentioned this in terms of us kind of supporting you to kind of identify other funding opportunities. But starting with SIF, even though we presented on SIF round 1, the round 4 today, there are also opportunities to engage with the previous rounds of SIF because of how SIF works. It works in a discovery, alpha, beta stage. And actually, we made some changes to the funding scheme, which means that you can have direct entry into either the alpha or the beta phase, provided you've got the subsequent kind of work done previously. And of course, you have to go through our the kind of regular assessment process. But what that means is that there are multiple opportunities to kind of engage and kind of work with SIF. So round 1 is kind of up and running, but we've done all the 3 rounds, and the beta projects are actually in train now. So if you're interested in the project, you can speak to them, and there might be opportunities to work with them directly. But from a funding direct perspective, the access to betas is not there anymore. In terms of round 2, the beta competition actually had opened on the 19th of Feb and runs all the way through to 22nd of May. And in terms of round 3, the discovery projects have been kind of locked in, but actually the alpha application opens on the 25th of March and runs to 19th of June, and the beta dates are kind of TBD. And then round 4, of course, is what we're talking about now, where all 3 phases are really up for engagement. And yeah, if you have any particular questions on these, it's worth also this. If you just Google SIF Innovation Challenges, all the Ofgem documents will come up, so you can actually go back and see round 2 and round 3 challenges and the details, and see if you perhaps may have worked on another funded project which has got a direct relevance to one of those. So it's really worth looking into it, and do reach out to any of us on the call here, and I'm sure we'll be happy to kind of talk you through that. And just another bit of, I guess, information is there are other relevant innovation funding opportunities as well, if you feel that perhaps SIF is not the right one for you. And just very quickly, there's the Digital Twin Energy Grids program that's actually opening in April and closing in May, which is looking at data interoperability, system modeling, cybersecurity, threat analysis, digital twinning, and also a range of data related kind of use cases for grid stability, forecasting, and balancing. So that's up and it's going to be up and running from April. So you might want to look at that. That's part of a UKRI kind of resilient world program. Then there's an automotive AI and kind of, but yeah, those two programs. If in case you're working on anything kind of automotive related, either on the manufacturing side or supply chain side, it's kind of worth looking at that. That opens. I believe that actually closes in a week's time. So that might be a bit close. The next one is the feasibility studies for AI Series 2. That's again an UKRI program. So if you're working on any business challenge across kind of logistics, transport, agricultural, food processing, that's definitely one for you to keep an eye on. And then finally, it's the knowledge transfer partnerships, and that's really to help place specialist skill sets in businesses which you might not have. So if that looks interesting to you, definitely worth looking at that. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to run through all of this, but there are also like past programs where you can see best practices and you can see projects and you can see what they've done, what the learnings are, and these are all good projects to kind of base your applications off of. Net zero living, net zero heat, PFA, the kind of AEM, the driving electric revolution, heat pump ready program. These are all programs that we have ongoing discussions with. There are projects that have come from these funds into SIF and vice versa. So it's definitely kind of worth looking at it. You have all the links on the table here. So I'll now hand over to Elsa to tell you how you can actually access all of these documents. Elsa, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Manu. My name is Elsa. I'm a project manager in the SIF program working with the innovation team. So this slide, we've just got some fancy QR codes here, which you can scan for more information. So we've got one for the expression of interest. We've got one for the webinars, show and tell videos, and the Introduction to Energy Networks series. The slides and recording of this webinar is going to be circulated afterwards, so don't worry if you don't have time to get out your phone and scan all of these now. Next slide, please, Manu. Thanks. And we've also got some links here with more information about the SIF program, how you can engage with us and contact us in our newsletter, our blogs, our podcasts. And there's also links again to 60-second videos that some of our current projects have done, our webpage and our web address for inquiries and so on. And this is important because, as Manu and Beth and Ellen have all said, it's really important that you take a look to find out whether the idea or innovation that you're proposing fits within SIF and doesn't conflict with projects that we already have funded. So again, this will be circulated afterwards for you to take a look at. Thank you. Next slide, please, Manu. Right, and I think we're just going to go into questions and answers now. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or to use the raise hand function. Thank you.
And whilst we're waiting for the first couple of questions, Simon, would you like to say a couple of words on your programme?
Thank you, David. So my name is Simon Hart, Head of Cyber Physical Infrastructure and Digital Twins at Innovate UK. So we actually sit in the digital and tech team at Innovate, and we have a competition coming up that was mentioned by Manny just briefly that will look to fund some of the underlying difficulties around data interoperability, cybersecurity, cyber resilience within the energy networks. So it's kind of designed to be complementary with the Ofgem SIF Round 4, and we will be publishing that relatively soon on the Innovate UK website. It is kind of look to help with some of the underpinning challenges related to getting data shared between networks, between operational technologies, between analytics and predictions. And it's aimed to help prepare the way for digital twins. It's not necessarily to develop them, but it's to look at some of the underpinning difficulties that exist already within that. And I'm sure we can share around a few more details of that as soon as it's ready to go live. It will open for applications around the 22nd of April.
Great, thank you, Simon. So keep your eyes out for that, particularly if you're working in one of those areas, and it might act as a bit of a springboard into the SIF later on. Do we have any
Yeah.
other questions, Elsa?
Got a couple of questions in the chat, David. I think the first one around green hydrogen. Is there any signposting you can give around the kind of most relevant resources? So yeah, SIF, I mean, there are a portfolio of projects on green hydrogen, and Beth has come online. So Beth, do you want to take that in terms of, yeah, the hydrogen projects?
Yeah, of course. Obviously we have our round 3 challenge, which is applicable. But sorry, the third challenge of round 4, I meant to say. But also Innovate UK KTN have a fantastic hydrogen innovation network with lots of resources where they can point you to the relevant thing. I'm just going to pop the link in the chat. They also have an expression of interest where you can showcase your hydrogen innovation. They'll help link you up to the relevant stakeholders. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Beth. I think there's one on, yeah, link to slides that's been answered. Just running through the questions. When would a discovery project have to start by?
Yeah, I have popped an answer in for that one.
Oh,
And
you answered. Okay.
the round 4 projects the discovery phase of round 4 will start in Q1 2025.
Cool. The next question is, our main office is based in France. Are there any restrictions due to the fact that we're not UK based? No, there are no restrictions. You can apply into SIF. As David and others mentioned, the project lead needs to be a network, but the activity must be in the UK. So the project activity must happen in the UK when you come to the demonstration phase. And yeah, if you have capability and you're wanting any links or introductions, it's definitely worth docking into our ideation process and attending the ideation workshops and probably an innovation surgery as well, if that's something of interest. So yeah, short answer, no, there are no restrictions, Phil.
I've got a hand up from Philip.
Oh, Phil.
Hello. Yeah, we're thinking of participating as what you might call a key supplier. Is there some guidance somewhere we can read about when we cost out a solution, what's permissible and isn't? How costs need to be presented as part of a bid? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there is some guidance in the SIF governance documents. If one of my colleagues could pull that up, and we'll pop it in the chat. In the discovery phase, really, a lot of the work is around feasibility studies. So a lot of it is desktop research and engaging with stakeholders. So typically, we don't often see a huge conflict in the eligibility of costs for that. For wider kind of asset development, if it's an energy network asset, so something that would be owned and operated underneath the regulatory framework by an energy network, then that will be a permissible cost. Where it's more whole system assets, essentially we've got guidance which the networks are very familiar on how that can be financed. It can be counted as a contribution to the project, but at scale, it's unlikely that we'll be able to fund the collaborative research and development of something like a storage device, for instance.
Right. So someone's going to publish a link, maybe.
Yeah,
Great.
I'll dig it out now.
Thank you.
It's in. I've just popped it in the chat.
Oh, marvelous.
No worries.
Thank you. The next question, I don't know, Paul, if you want to take it, is, can startup companies with no trading history participate?
Thanks, Manu. Yes, the answer is yes. So again, back to David's previous response, all of the projects that we fund are led by one of the Energy Network licensees, but there's no restriction in terms of location or size or age of any companies that are project partners within those projects.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a date for Challenge 2 webinar? Well, there's a second, so there are 2 webinars that's going to happen. This is the first one, and the second webinar is Friday next week on the 15th, which will kind of broadly go through similar content. And then other details on specific challenges, you can get in touch with us directly or book an innovation surgery slot. If you're interested in one particular challenge, you have an idea you want to discuss with us, please do get in touch so that we can have that conversation.
And we'll be publishing the full challenge document tomorrow on the Ofgem website. So we'll have that link included with all the materials from this webinar, but that provides more detail on each of the challenges, including partner requirements, which we've softened this year, but we still do expect to see extensive partnering between the networks. We just want to give the market a little bit more freedom to decide what types of partners are most suitable for their proposal.
Yeah, good point, Dave. Yeah, definitely worth having a read of the challenge document when it gets published tomorrow. Into the last few minutes, any more questions?
I will say there's there is an expression of interest form. I've popped the link in the chat as well. It is on the QR code in the slides, but if you scroll up at 11:48, it is in the chat there.
Beth, just one more question come in there about how does somebody book an innovation surgery slot?
So you can complete the expression of interest form, or you can drop an email into the SIF mailbox. There's 2 ways to contact us there. And we'll get something in the diary very soon.
Yeah, if you do the UI form, I think that gives us a little bit of sense of your background, etc. It helps us to tailor the surgery meeting better. So definitely recommend you to do the UI, please.
If there's no other questions, then Manu, will we?
Yeah, I think we can wrap up.
Finish things up. Well, I started, so I guess I'll finish. Just to thank everyone once again for their time and attendance. You know, really great to see a good number of people here, lots of innovators by the sounds of it, and we really hope that you engage with us and get involved. And best of luck if you do decide to take some sort of project forward. So thanks again for all your time. Catch up with you all soon.